Hi, everyone. Libby Carino, member of the board of directors for COISA, welcoming you to one of the last episodes of the COISA Rising Together online video series. I am beyond thrilled to bring to you Patrick O'Neill. Patrick is the founder of Extraordinary Conversations, which is a Toronto-based management consulting firm that he founded in 1988. And there, the firm specializes in change management, leadership development, team performance, organizational communications, and conflict. But far beyond that is Patrick's transformative work as in the area of leadership development and personal development and the cross-cultural perennial wisdoms that he helps organizations and individuals incorporate into the way in which they lead and learn and live. And for the better part of 10 years, he has been a tremendous inspiration of mine. He has written 2 books, both of which are on my shelf, and I reference them regularly. The most recent being The Only Certain Freedom, which is the transformative journey of the entrepreneur. So I want to welcome Patrick to this COISA series and offer you my deepest thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Libby.
So we talked a little bit about where we are in the world right now with respect to where people have been as it relates to COVID, which is what launched this COISA series. Right. And now at the tail end of the series, find ourselves not so much sheltering in place anymore, but the doors are opening and we are walking into the world again, which requires a whole other set of skills. And it comes at a time when we are in spring. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about your work with Angeles Arian and the Fourfold Way and what springtime means specifically around the way of the healer and the opening of the heart.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here. Dr. Angeles Arian was a Basque American cultural anthropologist. And we taught together for over 20 years. Angie died about 6 years ago, but she left behind her a tremendous body of work, which she called the Fourfold Way. And the Fourfold Way is really an old map that comes from the Basque culture, but is also a universal principle. And it can be found in the wisdom traditions of land-based peoples around the world. And it's basically follows the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. And each of the directions represents an archetype, an inner archetype. And the way of the north is the way of the leader. In the south is the way of the healer. In the east is the way of the visionary. And in the west is the way of the teacher. And each of those ways carries a set of tools and practices that help us become more congruent within our own nature, but also how to live in harmony with each other and also with the earth. And Angeles wrote this book in 1993, I think, but the work predates that. And I've continued the Fourfold Way under a new name, the Four Directions, since Angie died. Now, the Four Directions work, the way of the leader, is all about leadership and all about the principles of governance and working with the 3 powers, the power of presence, the power of communication, and the power of position, and how to hold power from a place of character. The work of the healer in the south and the north work is winter work. South work, the way of the healer, is the work of the spring. And the principle there is to pay attention to what has heart and meaning. And it's easy to get confused when times are chaotic. But one of the things I think that helps us at a time like this is that we've had a lot of time to reflect on what's most important. And we're getting a lot of lessons in our worldwide society right now of what what is really going to help us survive on this planet going forward. And we have some, I think, values changes to consider. The summer, which we're just around the corner from, is the way of the visionary. And the practice here is to tell the truth without blame or judgment. And we're in a global experiment right now about how to speak truth to power. And do it in a constructive way rather than a destructive way. And the final practice is the work of the fall, the work of letting go, the work of the teacher, where we're learning principally about trust.
And so, because we find ourselves, all, I think, searching for this inner and outer congruency,
Mm-hmm.
The way that I hear the fourfold way in my own reading of it, and then of course in the four directions, is that it really is it's really the work. It's coming into congruency, looking at things sort of all of the time, in relation to one another. And so for many of us, we have had a lot of isolated time away from community or away from others, and it's shifting now again. And so, as we look at where we find ourselves, what springs to your mind about this particular moment as we reopen and as we move from spring to summer?
One of the things that we have to recognize is that we each have an impact. And we've been learning a lot about our impact through sheltering in place, taking responsibility for ensuring that our well-being and the well-being of our family, which are one of the most important things in our lives, are looked after, but also of the community. And I think it's been a huge teaching on right relationship and community. The way of the healer is all about relationship lines, how to be respectful and honorable in relationship, and how to really steward relationship of self, of our relationship with another person, with the family, and with the world at large. We're also looking at a huge shift in our relationship with the planet we live on. And that was certainly one of the things that Angeles Arian was deeply committed to at a time when not a lot of people were talking about it, how to be in right relationship with the earth. And it springs from being in right relationship with ourselves.
And so one of the things that I wanted to hear you talk about was how each of us has a capacity to work with our own and cultivate our own inner healer, so that we can deal with this palpable sense of fear and pain, and find ourselves somewhere in this aspect of both, self-love and universal love. And what is that relationship, and how can we, how does that come up in the way of the healer?
Well, the principle, the most potent healing salve that we have on the planet is love. And when we are connected to what has heart and meaning, we really have the capacity to express love. So healing comes in our lives when we're in right relationship with ourselves. And so self-love, self-trust, and self-respect are the practices of self-work. One-to-one relationship, marriage or partnership, is the work of intimacy. And can I be open and trusting and honest and respectful in my relationship lines? Can I give and receive love? Because this is the flow of love is really the work of the healer in the South. And then can I bring my heart into my relationships in the community as well? And, I think the great dysfunction that we are experiencing in race relations at this time is a huge opportunity for us to recommit to compassion and generosity of spirit, which is also practices that are associated with the healer.
And so what I'm hearing is that the way of the healer, drives us to our heart, right? And that the sort of, can you talk just a little bit about when you and Angie taught on courage and the relationship courage and bravery and heart, and what does that mean as it's to personal compassion and external compassion?
Yeah, sure. The first thing we have to understand about the heart is the heart is an organ of vision. And the heart anatomically has four chambers. And when the four chambers are working together, we have an opening, an open-hearted approach to life. So the four chambers have a purpose. Each one has a different purpose. We have the full heart, the strong heart, the open heart, and the clear heart. So the full heart is about engagement in life. Can we be fully engaged in what we're doing? Because if we're not fully engaged, we have a tendency to be half-hearted. And half-heartedness is where we carry our obligations rather than our commitments. Strong-heartedness is about courage. Can we, strong-heartedness, the opposite of strong-heartedness is weak-heartedness. So where are we strong-hearted? Where are we in fear or doubt? And strong-heartedness is the source of courage. The root word of courage is coeur, which is the French word for heart. And this is where we have the ability to be all that we are and to take a stand and hold our ground, even in the face of opposition or disagreement. The open heart is the third aperture. This is the home of generosity of spirit. And the opposite of open-heartedness is closed-heartedness. And this is where we carry our anger and our hurt and our pain, and we've decided to shut down and pull away. And the fourth chamber of the heart is the clear heart. And the opposite of the clear heart is the doubting or confused heart. And when we're clear-hearted, we can basically make our way towards what has heart and meaning because there's no impediment or obstacle. So when all four of the chambers are working together, the mysterious fifth chamber opens, and that is the awakened heart. And the awakened heart is where we walk the mystical path with practical feet.
And how is it? Is there a daily practice? Are there questions that they can ask themselves in moments of doubt or heartedness or wherever they find themselves in that?
Yeah, and it's a really good meditation. It's a really good tool, a really good meditation to take some time every day and do an inventory on where you are in your heart. You know, where am I full-hearted? And if I'm not full-hearted about something, what do I need to review in terms of my commitments? Where have I lost heart for something? And maybe it's time that I either retire that commitment or I renegotiate. For the strong heart, which asks us to be courageous, where have I become weak-hearted and what frightened me? Because usually weak-heartedness is a sign of being frightened about something. As far as the open heart, where have I closed my heart and why? What am I angry about? This is usually at the chamber we carry our anger and our resentments in. And the clear heart is where we ask ourselves if we've found a pocket of doubt in our lives. It's always an announcement that we need to wait before we make choices because we don't want to make a choice where we carry doubt or confusion and create a misstep for ourselves. So those kinds of questions can help us examine the state of the heart. But then if we find impediments, what is the release work I have to do? What's the forgiveness work I have to do? What's the strengthening work I have to do? What's the recommitment work I have to do? What's the waiting work I have to do? You know, we're so conditioned to act in our culture, and sometimes we need some time to reflect, pause and reflect.
And I that just really speaks to the what I know you and Angela's taught with the 4 universal addictions, and sort of really speaks to the addiction to to intensity or urgency, our culture, and that we don't give ourselves the kind of time necessary to integrate and to honor each of the four chambers, right?
Right. And so the four universal addictions, these are the addictions that sort of are give rise to drugs or alcohol or sexuality. But you've named the first one quite well, the addiction to intensity. And sometimes we get desensitized in our lives. And the only way we can feel anything is to make sure everything is so intense. But of course, that produces an enormous amount of stress in our lives. The second addiction is the addiction to perfection. And there's a difference between excellence and perfection. With excellence, there's always a margin to learn and grow. With perfection, we always have to do everything perfectly. The third addiction is the need to know. And this is an announcement we don't trust. And the fourth addiction is the addiction to criticality, what's not working. We never see what's actually working. And there's usually a lot more working than sometimes we give credit for. So those are signs of dysfunction in the way of the healer.
And I find the last one to be so important right now as we are. It's so easy to hyper-focus on what's wrong when there are so many things that we could join together and be solution-oriented and determine that there are a lot of pieces that do work to help the things that don't, our gifts and resources and talents and
Right.
the things that you and Angie have taught about. And so
Right.
that's, that brings me to really how you talk about that sort of integrity and being with all of that, and that giving and receiving and all of the things that help us be in right relationship as we tackle what's ahead of us, really, in the world. And so can you speak just a little bit about that?
Yeah, and just to recognize that the four universal addictions come from injury and trauma. And we're dealing with a world that is deeply injured and deeply traumatized. And so it's easy to become resigned and cynical and critical. And those are what I would call a form of spiritual disease or soul loss. So there are remedies. And one of the great remedies is the practice of giving gratitude, because gratitude keeps the heart open, and gratitude keeps us in a place of recognition that despite some of the challenges that we may be facing, that this too shall pass, and that if we stay connected to our gifts and talents and knowledge and skills and resources, each other, that we can find a way forward, and we can find a better way forward. And we always have. We have been a species of continuous improvement. And I think sometimes we forget that we have the creative capacity to solve a lot of problems. And if we can stay connected to generosity, I think many of our problems might clear up on their own.
Can you talk a little bit about how to cultivate that type of generosity? I think there's a word that I heard you say once that I know Angela said something about royal generosity
royal generosity. Yeah. It comes from a place of recognizing that life is a gift, and that that we have a great deal to be grateful for, even in very difficult circumstances. The gift of life is a gift that provides us with an opportunity to shapeshift our experience. And what I mean by shapeshift our experience is that we can meet experience from a pragmatic and practical place, but we can also meet it from a creative place, and that we can recognize that if we meet conditions that aren't working, that we have an obligation to move from description to prescription. What can I do here that would add value, or that would add solace, or that would add uh, help. There's so much that human beings have to offer, and when we remember that we're walking a path that we don't return from. We're walking each other back home, in the words of Ram Dass. And so, what else can we do but be generous with each other? You know, the other plan isn't working, so let's try this one.